Imagine dedicating your entire life to protecting someone. You wake up every morning knowing that another person's safety depends on your vigilance. You train for years, sacrifice personal relationships, and live under constant pressure. Then, in a single moment that lasts less than 30 seconds, everything you've worked for crumbles. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Marcus Wellington, a man whose 20-year career protecting the British royal family ended not with honor or retirement, but with a mistake so shocking that it sent ripples through Buckingham Palace and changed royal security protocols forever. What you're about to read happened behind the heavily guarded walls of royal residences, in the corridors where only the most trusted individuals are allowed to walk. It's a story about human error, the weight of responsibility, and how one person's split-second decision can alter the course of history. The truth is more dramatic than any movie, more shocking than any headline, and more human than you might expect, because sometimes the people we trust with the most important jobs are just as vulnerable to making mistakes as the rest of us. Get ready to discover what really happened on that cold November morning, when protocol was broken, trust was shattered, and a career came to an abrupt end in the most unexpected way possible. Marcus Wellington had always known he was different from other children. While his classmates dreamed of becoming football stars or astronauts, Marcus spent his afternoons watching documentaries about the British royal family. He memorized the names of every guard, studied their uniforms, and practiced standing perfectly still for hours in his bedroom mirror. His fascination wasn't born from celebrity worship or idle curiosity. Marcus came from a family where service to the crown was considered the highest honor. His grandfather had served in the Royal Navy during World War II, his father had been a police constable who often worked royal events, and his uncle had spent 15 years as a yeoman warder at the Tower of London. When Marcus turned 18 in 1995, he didn't hesitate to apply for military service with the goal of eventually joining the Royal Protection Unit. His physical training was grueling, but Marcus approached it with the dedication of someone who had found his calling. He ran 10 miles every morning before dawn, spent hours at the shooting range until his accuracy was nearly perfect, and studied emergency protocols until he could recite them in his sleep. The selection process for royal protection was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. Beyond the physical requirements, candidates underwent extensive psychological evaluation. They needed to demonstrate not just courage and quick thinking, but also the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure while maintaining absolute discretion. Marcus excelled in every category. His instructors noted his exceptional attention to detail and his ability to spot potential threats from remarkable distances. During simulation exercises, he consistently made split-second decisions that prioritized the safety of his assigned protectee above all else, including his own life. After 2 years of intensive training, Marcus received the call that would change his life forever. He was being assigned to the Royal Protection Unit, specifically to work within the Prince of Wales's security detail. The prince at that time was navigating one of the most challenging periods of his public life, dealing with intense media scrutiny and public criticism following his divorce. Marcus's first day at Clarence House was a mixture of excitement and terror. The building itself seemed to hold centuries of history within its walls. As he walked through corridors lined with priceless artwork and antique furniture, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The head of security, Commander James Mitchell, was a stern man in his 50s who had been protecting members of the royal family for over 20 years. He had served during some of the most turbulent times in recent royal history and had developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate threats before they materialized. Commander Mitchell looked Marcus up and down during their first meeting, his eyes taking in every detail of the young guard's appearance and demeanor. Marcus stood at attention, his uniform perfectly pressed, his posture rigid with nervous energy. "Son," Commander Mitchell said in a voice that carried the authority of decades of experience, "protecting the Prince of Wales isn't just a job. It's a sacred trust. Every person who gets within 50 feet of His Royal Highness does so because we have decided they pose no threat. Every conversation he has in public happens because we have cleared the area. Every step he takes outside these walls is possible because we have walked that path first." The commander paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in before continuing. "You will see things that never appear in newspapers. You will hear conversations that could change the course of this nation's history. You will witness moments of joy, sorrow, anger, and vulnerability that belong to one of the most scrutinized human beings on Earth. Your job is to ensure his safety while allowing him to live as normal a life as possible under extraordinary circumstances. Marcus nodded, understanding that he was being entrusted with something far greater than a typical security assignment. This wasn't about protecting a celebrity or a politician. This was about safeguarding someone whose personal safety was directly connected to the stability of the British monarchy itself. His training within the royal household was even more intense than his military preparation had been. Marcus learned the layout of every royal residence down to the smallest detail. He memorized the faces and backgrounds of hundreds of staff members, regular visitors, and potential threats. He studied the prince's schedule patterns, his preferences, his habits, and his routines. The Prince of Wales, Marcus quickly discovered, was far more complex than his public image suggested. He was a man who genuinely cared about the causes he championed, often working late into the night on correspondence and planning for his various charitable endeavors. He had a sharp wit and genuine concern for the people around him, including his security detail. Unlike some members of the royal family who maintained formal distance from their protection officers, the prince made an effort to know the people responsible for his safety. He remembered birthdays, asked about family members, and showed appreciation for the sacrifices his security team made on his behalf. Marcus found himself working longer hours than he had ever imagined possible. Royal protection meant being available around the clock, ready to travel anywhere in the world with minimal notice, and maintaining constant vigilance even during seemingly routine activities. The work was physically demanding, mentally exhausting, and required a level of dedication that left little room for personal relationships. Marcus's girlfriend of 3 years eventually ended their relationship, unable to compete with the demands of his career. His social life disappeared almost entirely, replaced by an existence that revolved entirely around the prince's schedule and security requirements. But Marcus had never been happier. He had found his purpose, and every morning when he put on his uniform, he felt the satisfaction of knowing he was serving his country in the most direct way possible. He was protecting someone whose safety mattered not just to Britain, but to the entire Commonwealth and beyond. The months turned into years, and Marcus's reputation within the Royal Protection Unit grew steadily. His colleagues respected his dedication and relied on his sharp instincts during challenging assignments. He had successfully handled crowd control during difficult public appearances, identified potential security threats at state dinners, and maintained seamless protection during countless private and public engagements. Marcus had worked royal tours to dozens of countries, state visits that required coordination with foreign security services, and high-profile events where the margin for error was virtually non-existent. He had proven himself capable of thinking quickly under pressure and adapting to unexpected situations while never losing sight of his primary responsibility. By 2010, Marcus had been promoted twice and was considered one of the most reliable members of the prince's security detail. His colleagues often joked that Marcus had an internal radar for trouble, able to spot potential problems before they developed into actual threats. The prince himself had come to rely on Marcus's judgment and often requested his presence during particularly challenging assignments. This level of trust was not given lightly within the Royal Protection Unit, and Marcus wore it as a badge of honor. He had saved money to purchase a small flat in London, finally achieving some stability in his personal life. He had even begun dating again, though he was careful to choose someone who understood the demands and secrecy requirements of his profession. Marcus thought he had found his permanent place in the world. He imagined continuing to serve in royal protection for another 20 years, perhaps eventually becoming a commander himself, training the next generation of guards who would dedicate their lives to protecting the royal family. He had no way of knowing that everything was about to change, that a single moment on a cold November morning would end not just his career, but would also force him to question everything he thought he knew about duty, loyalty, and the price of human error. The irony was that Marcus had prepared for every conceivable threat except the one that would ultimately destroy him. He had trained to face armed attackers, hostile crowds, natural disasters, and international incidents. But he had never prepared for the possibility that his greatest enemy would be his own momentary lapse in judgment. November 15, 2015 began like any other Sunday morning at Highgrove House, the Prince of Wales's private residence in Gloucestershire. The autumn air was crisp, and a light frost covered the meticulously maintained gardens that the prince took such pride in cultivating. Marcus had been on duty since 6 o'clock that morning, conducting his routine security sweep of the property's perimeter. The prince's Sunday schedule was typically lighter than his weekday commitments, usually consisting of personal time in his gardens, private meetings with estate managers, and correspondence work in his study. This particular morning, however, included a special appointment that had required additional security coordination. Dr. Sarah Hughes, a renowned botanist from the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew, was scheduled to arrive at 10 o'clock to discuss a new conservation project the prince was considering. The meeting had been planned for weeks, and Marcus had personally reviewed Dr. Percapris Hughes's background and security clearance multiple times. The botanist's credentials were impeccable. She held advanced degrees from Cambridge and had worked with the royal family on previous occasions. Her research on endangered plant species aligned perfectly with the prince's environmental interests, and she had been specifically recommended by trusted advisors within his inner circle. Marcus had coordinated with the main gate security team to ensure Dr. Hughes would be properly cleared and escorted to the main house upon her arrival. The protocol was straightforward and had been executed hundreds of times before with other visitors to the estate. At 9:45, Marcus received confirmation that Dr. Hughes had arrived at the main entrance and was being processed through the standard security procedures. Her identification had been verified. Her vehicle had been inspected, and she was being escorted by a junior protection officer toward the main house. The prince was in his study, reviewing documents related to the upcoming meeting while enjoying his morning tea. The room was filled with natural light streaming through tall windows that overlooked the gardens he loved so much. Ancient oak trees, their leaves golden with autumn colors, formed a natural barrier between the study and the public footpath that ran along the estate's boundary. Marcus positioned himself in the corridor outside the study, maintaining visual contact with both the entrance to the room and the main hallway leading to the front door. This was standard positioning for private meetings, allowing him to monitor the prince's immediate surroundings while maintaining a clear line of sight to any approaching visitors. At exactly 10 o'clock, Marcus heard the front door open and the sound of footsteps approaching through the entrance hall. The junior protection officer's voice carried clearly as he announced Dr. Hughes's arrival to the household staff. Everything was proceeding according to protocol, the prince called out from his study, indicating he was ready to receive his visitor. Marcus prepared to conduct the final security check that preceded all meetings with outside visitors, even those who had been previously cleared and vetted. This final check was a critical component of royal protection protocol. Regardless of how thoroughly a visitor had been screened in advance, the assigned protection officer was required to make visual confirmation of the person's identity and conduct a final assessment of any potential security concerns immediately before they entered the prince's presence. Marcus had performed this same procedure thousands of times throughout his career. It was second nature to him, an automatic sequence of observations and assessments that he could complete in less than 30 seconds while appearing completely natural and unobtrusive to both the prince and his visitor. As footsteps approached the study door, Marcus stepped forward to begin his final security check. The junior protection officer appeared first, followed by what Marcus assumed would be Dr. Hughes. But something was immediately wrong. The person walking toward him was definitely a woman of approximately the right age and build that matched Dr. Hughes's description. She was professionally dressed in a manner appropriate for meeting with the Prince of Wales. Her demeanor was calm and confident, exactly what would be expected from an accomplished academic. But her face was completely wrong. Marcus had studied Dr. Hughes's photograph multiple times during his preparation for this meeting. He had memorized her facial features, her hair color, her approximate height and build. The woman approaching him looked similar enough to pass casual observation, but Marcus's trained eye immediately detected significant discrepancies. The facial structure was different. The eye color was wrong. The hair, while styled similarly to Dr. Hughes's appearance in recent photographs, was clearly a different texture and shade. Even the way this woman carried herself was subtly different from what Marcus would have expected based on his research. In the space of perhaps 5 seconds, Marcus realized he was facing a potential security nightmare. someone who was not Dr. Spade. Sarah Hughes had somehow passed through the initial security screening and was now steps away from entering the Prince of Wales's private study. The implications were staggering. If this woman was an imposter, how had she obtained identification convincing enough to fool the gate security team? What were her intentions? How many other people might be involved in whatever plan was unfolding? Marcus's training took over immediately. His hand moved instinctively toward his communication device to alert the security control room, while his body positioned itself to block the woman's path to the study door. Every muscle in his body was coiled and ready to respond to whatever threat might be emerging. But then something even more confusing happened. The woman smiled warmly and extended her hand in greeting, speaking in a voice that was cultured and educated, exactly matching what Marcus would have expected from a Cambridge-trained botanist. "Officer Wellington," she said, clearly knowing his name. "I'm Dr. Hughes. Thank you so much for arranging this morning's security. I know these procedures can be quite complex, and I appreciate everyone's professionalism." Her knowledge of his name was not necessarily suspicious. Visitors were often briefed on the names of the protection officers they would encounter during their visit. But combined with the facial discrepancies Marcus had observed, this detail only added to his growing concern. Marcus found himself in an impossible position. Protocol demanded that he immediately halt the meeting and initiate security procedures to investigate the identity discrepancy. But what if he was wrong? What if this really was Dr. Hughes and the photographs he had studied were somehow outdated or misleading? The consequences of stopping a legitimate meeting based on incorrect identification would be severe. The prince's schedule was carefully coordinated months in advance, and unnecessary security alerts could damage important relationships with academic and scientific communities. But the consequences of allowing an imposter into the prince's presence were infinitely worse. If this woman posed any kind of threat, Marcus's failure to act could result in harm to the Prince of Wales, an outcome that would be absolutely catastrophic. Marcus made a split-second decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of immediately implementing security protocols, he decided to ask the woman a few quick questions to verify her identity. He reasoned that a real botanist would easily be able to answer basic questions about her field and her planned discussion with the prince. "Dr. Consummate Hughes," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady and professional. "Could you remind me of the specific conservation project you'll be discussing with His Royal Highness this morning?" The woman's response was immediate and detailed. She spoke knowledgeably about endangered orchid species, habitat preservation, and funding mechanisms for botanical research. Her answers were exactly what Marcus would have expected from someone with Dr. Hughes's credentials and research background. Marcus felt some of his initial concern beginning to fade. Perhaps the photographs he had studied were indeed misleading, or perhaps his memory was playing tricks on him. The woman's knowledge seemed genuine, and her manner was entirely appropriate for the meeting context. Still uncertain but running out of time, Marcus made the decision to allow the meeting to proceed while maintaining heightened vigilance. He would stay close enough to intervene immediately if any suspicious behavior became apparent, and he would conduct additional identity verification after the meeting concluded. Marcus stepped aside and allowed the woman to approach the study door. The prince looked up from his papers with a warm smile, clearly pleased to begin discussing one of his favorite subjects with someone who shared his passion for environmental conservation. "Dr. Hughes," the prince said, rising from his chair, "how wonderful to see you again. I've been looking forward to discussing your orchid preservation work." The word "again" struck Marcus like a physical blow. The prince was indicating that he had met Dr. Hughes previously, which meant he would immediately recognize if this woman was an imposter. Marcus felt a wave of relief, assuming that the prince's reaction would quickly resolve any remaining doubts about the visitor's identity. But instead of the warm recognition Marcus expected to see, he noticed a brief flicker of confusion cross the prince's face. It was subtle, lasting only a fraction of a second, but Marcus's trained observation skills caught it immediately. The prince recovered quickly, extending his hand in greeting and gesturing toward the comfortable chairs arranged near the window for their discussion. His manner remained gracious and welcoming, but Marcus could see that something was troubling him. Marcus realized with growing horror that his worst fears might be coming true. The prince's momentary confusion suggested that this woman was indeed not the Dr. Hughes he had met before. but his inherent politeness and diplomatic training were preventing him from immediately challenging her identity. The situation was spiraling beyond Marcus's control, and he knew he had to act immediately. But just as he reached for his communication device to summon additional security, everything went wrong in the most unexpected way possible. What happened next would be debated and analyzed for months afterward, with every participant offering different perspectives on the same shocking sequence of events. Marcus's version, the prince's account, and the woman's testimony would create a puzzle that senior royal protection officials would struggle to piece together completely. As Marcus reached for his communication device, the woman who claimed to be Dr. Hughes suddenly turned toward him with an expression of genuine confusion and growing alarm. Her academic composure cracked, revealing what appeared to be authentic bewilderment about the tension she was sensing in the room. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking between Marcus and the prince with obvious concern. "Have I done something wrong? I followed all the security instructions I was given when I arrived." Marcus froze, his hand halfway to his radio. The woman's reaction seemed completely genuine. If she was an imposter with malicious intentions, why would she be drawing attention to the security concerns rather than trying to deflect them? Her body language suggested someone who was confused and worried, not someone attempting to deceive or threaten anyone. The prince, demonstrating the diplomatic skills that had served him throughout decades of public life, stepped into the increasingly awkward silence with characteristic grace. "Not at all, Doctor. Hughes, Officer Wellington, is simply being thorough in his duties, which is exactly what we all want. Please, have a seat, and let's discuss your fascinating research." But Marcus could see that the prince was also struggling with something. His smile was practiced and professional, but there was uncertainty in his eyes that suggested he was wrestling with his own doubts about the visitor's identity. The three of them stood in an increasingly uncomfortable tableau, each waiting for someone else to resolve the growing tension. Marcus knew he had to make a decision immediately, but every option seemed fraught with potentially catastrophic consequences. In that moment of hesitation, Marcus made what he would later recognize as the most critical error of his entire career. Instead of trusting his training and implementing immediate security protocols, he allowed social pressure and uncertainty to override his professional instincts. "Of course, Your Royal Highness," Marcus said, stepping back toward his post. "Please proceed with your meeting. I'll be right outside if you need anything." As Marcus moved toward the door, he caught a glimpse of relief crossing both the prince's and the woman's faces. The tension in the room seemed to dissipate slightly, and both participants began settling into their chairs for what appeared to be a normal academic discussion. Marcus positioned himself just outside the study door, close enough to hear the conversation and respond immediately if needed, but far enough away to provide the privacy that such meetings required. He activated his radio to conduct a quiet status check with the security control room, intending to request additional background verification on Dr. Hughes without creating unnecessary alarm. The conversation in the study began normally, with the woman discussing her research in the same knowledgeable manner that had initially convinced Marcus to allow the meeting to proceed. She spoke about orchid conservation with genuine expertise, referencing specific studies and conservation challenges that demonstrated real familiarity with her supposed field. But as Marcus listened more carefully, he began to notice subtle inconsistencies that increased his anxiety. The woman occasionally used terminology that seemed slightly off, or referenced research in ways that didn't quite align with what Marcus remembered from his briefing materials about the real Dr. Hughes's work. Marcus quietly radioed the security control room, requesting immediate verification of Dr. Hughes's identity and asking for confirmation that the person who had arrived matched the biographical details and physical description in their security files. The response he received 5 minutes later changed everything. "Wellington, we have a significant problem," came the urgent voice of the duty officer. "We just received a call from Dr. Sarah Hughes herself. She's calling from Cambridge, where she's been all morning dealing with a family emergency. She never left Cambridge today, and she certainly isn't at Highgrove House." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The woman sitting with the Prince of Wales was definitely not Dr. Hughes, and she was now alone with the future King of England in a room with multiple potential weapons, including letter openers, heavy bookends, and other objects that could be used to cause harm. "Control, I need immediate backup at the study." Marcus whispered urgently into his radio. "We have an unknown individual in close proximity to the principal. initiating lockdown protocols now. Marcus knew he had no choice but to interrupt the meeting immediately, regardless of how awkward or embarrassing it might be. The prince's safety took absolute priority over all other considerations, including diplomatic concerns or potential misunderstandings. He opened the study door and stepped inside, his hand resting on his sidearm in accordance with threat response protocols. Both the prince and the woman looked up in surprise at his sudden entrance, clearly not expecting to be interrupted during their discussion. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus said in his most formal and authoritative voice, "I need to speak with you privately for a moment. It's a matter of immediate security." The prince's expression shifted from surprise to concern as he recognized the seriousness in Marcus's tone. His years of experience with security protocols told him that something significant was happening, and he immediately began to rise from his chair. The woman, however, remained seated, looking between Marcus and the prince with what appeared to be genuine confusion and growing fear. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "Why is everyone acting like something's wrong?" "I'm just here to discuss conservation research." Marcus moved to position himself between the woman and the prince, maintaining visual contact with both while speaking directly to his principal. "Sir, I need you to move toward the door immediately. Additional security personnel are en route." The prince, demonstrating the calm that had served him well during decades of public life, stood slowly and began moving toward Marcus and the door. But his eyes remained on the woman, and there was genuine concern in his expression rather than fear. "Officer Wellington," the prince said quietly, "perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. Dr. Hughes seems quite knowledgeable about her field, and I'm confident she poses no threat." It was at this moment that Marcus realized the full scope of his error. By allowing the meeting to proceed based on his uncertainty and social pressure, he had put the Prince of Wales in potential danger and had violated the most fundamental principles of royal protection. The woman suddenly stood as well, her movements quick but not threatening. Her face showed increasing distress as she began to understand that she was somehow at the center of a security incident. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, her voice now clearly showing fear. "My name is Dr. Sarah Hughes. I have identification. I was invited here for this meeting. Why are you treating me like a criminal?" Marcus kept his position between the woman and the prince while speaking into his radio to update the incoming security team. "Control, both the principal and the unknown individual are mobile. The principal appears cooperative. The individual claims to be Dr. Hughes, but we have confirmed the real Dr. Hughes is in Cambridge." Additional protection officers burst through the study door at that moment, their arrival adding to the chaos and confusion that was rapidly escalating. The woman stepped backward, clearly frightened by the sudden appearance of multiple armed security personnel. "Please don't hurt me," she said, raising her hands in a gesture of surrender. "I don't know what you think I've done, but I'm not a threat to anyone. I'm just a university researcher who came here for a meeting about plants." The prince, despite being quickly escorted from the room by the arriving security team, called back over his shoulder, "Please treat Dr. Hughes with courtesy. I'm certain this is simply a case of mistaken identity or administrative error." But Marcus knew it was far too late for courtesy or administrative explanations. Whether this woman was a confused academic, a mental health patient, or something far more dangerous, he had allowed an unverified individual to spend nearly 20 minutes alone with the Prince of Wales. The woman was quickly but gently restrained and escorted to a secure area of the house where she could be properly questioned and identified. She continued to insist that she was Dr. Sarah Hughes and that she had no understanding of why she was being treated as a security threat. As the immediate crisis was brought under control, Marcus found himself standing alone in the study, surrounded by the aftermath of what was clearly the worst security breach of his career. The chairs where the prince and the impostor had been sitting remained askew, and papers from their discussion were scattered across the small table between them. Marcus knew that his 20-year career in royal protection was effectively over. He had violated basic security protocols, endangered the Prince of Wales, and allowed an unidentified individual to penetrate the innermost circle of royal security. But the most disturbing aspect of the entire incident was still to come, as the investigation into the woman's identity would reveal a truth more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. The investigation that followed revealed a truth so bizarre that it initially seemed impossible. forcing everyone involved to question their understanding of what had actually transpired that November morning. The woman who had been detained was indeed named Dr. Sarah Hughes, and she was indeed a respected botanist, with credentials exactly matching those in the royal security files. The shocking discovery was that there were two doctors, Sarah Hughes, working in botanical research in the United Kingdom, both with remarkably similar backgrounds, both with legitimate reasons to be meeting with the Prince of Wales about conservation work. The real Dr. Hughes, who had been scheduled for the meeting, was Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Hughes from the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew. The woman who had actually arrived was Dr. Sarah Catherine Hughes from the University of Cambridge Botanical Department. Both women were accomplished researchers, both had worked on orchid conservation, and both had been recommended to the prince through different channels within the scientific community. The administrative error that led to this unprecedented security breach had occurred weeks earlier in the prince's private office, where two separate meeting requests involving botanists named Dr. Hughes had been processed simultaneously by different staff members. The scheduling coordinator had accidentally conflicted the appointments, sending meeting confirmation to the wrong Dr. Hughes while updating the security files with information about the other Dr. Hughes. Dr. Sarah Catherine Hughes had received her meeting invitation and had prepared extensively for what she believed was a legitimate appointment to discuss her research with the Prince of Wales. She had arrived at Highgrove House with complete confidence in her right to be there, carrying proper identification and academic credentials that matched her name and qualifications. The gate security team had cleared her based on the name Dr. Pross, Sarah Hughes appearing on their approved visitor list, without conducting the detailed physical verification that would have revealed the identity discrepancy. In the confusion of processing a legitimate appointment with matching credentials, the initial security screening had missed the fact that this was not the same Dr. Colin Hughes who had been originally scheduled and cleared. Dr. Kufla, Sarah Catherine Hughes's distress during the security incident had been completely genuine. She had no understanding of why she was being treated as a threat, had no knowledge of the scheduling error, and had believed throughout the entire ordeal that she was the victim of some terrible mistake or misunderstanding. The investigation also revealed that Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Hughes, the originally scheduled visitor, had indeed experienced a family emergency that morning and had attempted to contact the prince's office to reschedule. Her message had been received by staff, but in the confusion of weekend operations and minimal staffing, the cancellation had not been properly communicated to the security team. This series of administrative errors had created a perfect storm of miscommunication that had resulted in the wrong person being cleared for one of the most secure locations in the United Kingdom. The fact that both women were legitimate researchers with similar qualifications had made the error virtually undetectable until it was too late. For Marcus Wellington, the investigation's findings provided little comfort. While the security breach had resulted from administrative failures rather than his personal negligence, his decision to allow the meeting to proceed despite his concerns about identity verification represented a fundamental violation of protection protocols. Royal protection officers are trained to trust their instincts above all other considerations, and Marcus had allowed uncertainty and social pressure to override his professional judgment. Even though the visitor had ultimately posed no actual threat to the prince, the potential consequences of his decision could have been catastrophic. Commander James Mitchell conducted Marcus's disciplinary hearing personally, a sign of the seriousness with which the incident was being treated. The hearing took place in a stark conference room at the Royal Protection Headquarters, with Marcus facing a panel of senior officers who would determine his professional fate. "Officer Wellington," Commander Mitchell began, his voice carrying the weight of deep disappointment. "In 23 years of Royal Protection Service, I have never encountered a security breach quite like this one. The administrative failures that contributed to this incident will be addressed separately, but we are here to examine your actions and decisions." Marcus sat at attention, knowing that anything he said in his defense would sound like excuse-making. The facts were indisputable. He had identified potential identity discrepancies, had felt instinctive concern about the visitor, and had then allowed personal uncertainty to override established security protocols. "The protocols exist for exactly this type of situation," Commander Mitchell continued. "When a protection officer has any doubt about a visitor's identity or intentions, the response is immediate and non-negotiable. The meeting is terminated, the the principal is secured, and identity verification is completed before any further contact is permitted. Marcus nodded his understanding, accepting full responsibility for his failure to follow established procedures. Sir, I have no excuse for my actions. I allowed the social dynamics of the situation to influence my professional judgment, and I put the Prince of Wales at unnecessary risk. The hearing examined every aspect of the incident in exhaustive detail, from Marcus's initial security sweep to his final decision to allow the meeting to proceed. The panel reviewed his 20-year service record, his previous commendations, and the circumstances that had led to his error in judgment. The conclusion was inevitable, though it was delivered with obvious regret for the loss of an otherwise exemplary protection officer. Marcus Wellington was dismissed from the Royal Protection Unit, effective immediately, with his security clearance permanently revoked. The Prince of Wales himself requested a private meeting with Marcus before his departure, a gesture that was unprecedented in the handling of security dismissals. They met in the same study where the incident had occurred, with Commander Mitchell present to ensure proper protocol was maintained. "Officer Wellington," the prince said, his manner showing genuine sadness, "I want you to know that I hold no personal animosity toward you for what happened. I understand that you faced an impossible situation and made a human error in judgment." Marcus stood at attention, struggling to maintain his composure as he faced the man he had dedicated decades of his life to protecting. "Your Royal Highness, I failed in my primary duty to ensure your safety. There is no excuse for that failure," the prince continued. "You served with distinction for 20 years, and one moment of human fallibility does not erase that record of service. I hope you will find a way to apply your skills and dedication in a new career that brings you fulfillment." After his dismissal, Marcus faced the challenge of rebuilding his life outside the royal protection environment that had defined his identity for 2 decades. His security clearance revocation meant that most government and law enforcement positions were no longer available to him, forcing him to consider entirely different career paths. He eventually found work as a security consultant for private corporations, using his expertise to protect business executives and celebrities. The work was profitable and professionally satisfying, but it lacked the sense of historic purpose and national service that had driven his royal protection career. Marcus also struggled with the psychological impact of his dismissal, experiencing periods of depression and self-doubt that required professional counseling to overcome. The transition from a highly structured, mission-driven career to civilian life proved more difficult than he had anticipated. The incident at Highgrove House led to significant changes in royal protection protocols, particularly regarding identity verification and communication procedures between administrative and security staff. The 2 doctors barely subjected. Hughes' case became a training example used to educate new protection officers about the importance of trusting their instincts and following established procedures regardless of social pressure or uncertainty. Dr. Sarah Catherine Hughes, the innocent botanist who had unknowingly triggered the security crisis, eventually did meet with the Prince of Wales to discuss her research. The meeting took place several months later under properly coordinated circumstances, and she went on to receive funding for her orchid conservation work through one of the prince's charitable foundations. Marcus Wellington's story became a cautionary tale within royal protection circles, illustrating how even the most dedicated and experienced officers could fall victim to human error when faced with unprecedented situations. His case was studied not as an example of incompetence or negligence, but as a reminder of the constant vigilance and adherence to protocol required in royal protection work. Years later, Marcus reflected on the incident with the wisdom that comes from time and perspective. He understood that his error had resulted from a fundamental misunderstanding of his role as a protection officer. His job was not to make judgment calls about the likelihood of threats or the social appropriateness of security responses. His job was to follow established protocols that had been designed to prevent exactly the type of situation he had encountered. The morning of November 15, 2015, had lasted only a few hours, but its consequences had reshaped multiple lives and changed royal security procedures forever. It served as a stark reminder that in the world of royal protection, there are no small mistakes, only potentially catastrophic ones that can end careers and endanger lives in the space of a single moment of poor judgment. Marcus had learned that the weight of protecting someone like the Prince of Wales extends far beyond physical threats and security breaches. It encompasses the responsibility to maintain absolute adherence to protocol, even when doing so seems unnecessary, uncomfortable, or socially awkward. The price of that responsibility, as Marcus discovered too late, is the complete subordination of personal instincts to professional procedures, regardless of the human cost of that choice.